Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
An amazing moment on MSNBC as host Chris Jansing invited former 2020 presidential contender Julian Castro to weigh in on the 2024 Democratic primary. She didn't quite get what she was expecting from this former Obama cabinet official and card-carrying Democratic establishment member. Just take a listen.
I'm not as confident as a lot of people in Washington and the Democratic establishment seem to be that Joe Biden is going to do well against Donald Trump. It is a little bit concerning. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worrisome when you have a president that does have a record on the economy and other things that folks can be proud of, that he can be proud of, and yet you have him polling either right about tied in the margin of error with Trump or behind Trump in the ABC News Washington Post poll a few days ago. And that's related to concerns that Democrats and some independents have with the president, and something that has been unable to actually assuage the fears and the doubts that Democrats have. You cannot ignore the fact that more than half of Democrats in several polls over the last year have said that they wanted somebody other than Joe Biden to run. And right now, I think that the Democratic establishment is sort of trying to wipe that away, just sweep that under the rug. I'll give you a good example of that. The DNC, have a lot of respect for him, like a lot of the people there, but them deciding that there will be no primary, no debate. I think they actually need to give Joe Biden a chance to get out there and to show the American people what he can do, that he can run that campaign and, beat whoever runs in the primary, whoever those opponents are, even if it's just RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. I don't think that they want to wait until the fall of 2024 to have those debates.
Now, my favorite part of that whole clip is Jansing's audible shock at hearing Castro articulate the most basic and obvious facts, but facts that rarely, if ever, make it onto MSNBC's airwaves. His argument is, after all, indisputable. First of all, Castro points out diplomatically that it is pathetic, given Trump's venality, incompetence, and criminality, that Biden is at best tied with the man. Second, he makes the case that if Democrats are serious about actually beating Trump, a man they consider, or at least claim to consider, an existential threat, they better have a thoughtful process to assess every available candidate, or at the very least to allow Biden to sharpen his skills as best he can before he is up against the former president, who still appears to fully have his wits about him. And finally, Castro points out that the DNC can't just sweep under the rug the fact that a majority of Democratic voters do in fact want a Joe Biden alternative. By the way, even among MSNBC's propaganda-fed faithful, it is very likely that a majority of their audience agrees fully with Julian Castro here. After all, 79% of Biden's own 2020 voters want the Democratic Party to hold debates so that they can evaluate their alternatives. They actually believe in democracy. In fact, it's likely that the prevalence of this view gave Castro some level of comfort to bring up a point that is obvious to nearly everyone, but somehow unheard of in MSNBC green rooms. Both Chris Jansing and Julian Castro actually bring some interesting history to this exchange. So Jansing, you might recall, was the MSNBC host who famously looked like she was going to openly weep when Bernie Sanders dominated the Nevada caucuses. Remember this moment?
These, again, are people who work on the Strip within 2.5 miles of the Bellagio, largely people of color. Of those, the majority are Latino, and they are clearly, at least from eyeballing it, strongly in favor of Bernie Sanders, with Joe Biden coming in second.
So while Chris does hold herself out as a neutral journalist, she has let the mask slip in a particularly obvious way about where her loyalties actually lie. Now, Julian Castro is also kind of interesting. He's been willing to criticize Biden at times, especially on immigration and the border, issues that are a central part of his political identity. But you might also recall that Castro pretty overtly called Biden too old to be president in the last election. Take a listen.
That's a big difference, because Barack Obama's vision was not to leave 10 million people uncovered. He wanted every single person in this country covered. My plan would do that. Your plan would not.
They do not have to buy in. They do not have to buy in.
You just said that. You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in. You said they would have to buy in.
Have to buy in. If she qualifies for Medicaid,
are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Are you
forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago? I mean, I can't believe that you said 2 minutes ago that they had to buy in, and now you're saying they don't have to buy. You're forgetting that.
I said anyone.
Looks kind of prescient, doesn't it? Now, to be fair, last time around, Castro's attacks on Biden's age, they obviously didn't work. His decline didn't end up being a factor in the primary, or at least not a significant one in the general election. It's worth remembering that because it could end up being a non-factor again. We should be honest about that. But that's not what the polls suggest today, because Biden's a few years more infirm now. The American people have had more of an opportunity to assess his fitness, and they have notably found it quite lacking. In 2020, Biden basically had the primary wrapped up for him by Clyburn, Obama, and co after dismal performances in the first several states. And in the general election, he was able to use COVID as an excuse to stay off the campaign trail and was able to win based on people's feelings of disgust and exhaustion towards the Trump chaos. Now, the landscape this time is quite different. His approval rating is already a lot lower. In fact, a recent Axios focus group found that Biden voters were not inclined to give him a pass. Every single participant indicated they wanted him to debate, with one explaining specifically, quote, "I want whoever is representing me as president to be able to put together thoughts and cohesive arguments without needing flashcards or something." Notably, coming off the heels of a rare moment of honesty breaking through MSNBC's DNC propaganda, Chris Jansing then decided to cover this focus group. But this time, she brought on a Biden senior aide to make sure she got the answer that she actually wanted. First, listen to how she sets up this conversation. This is amazing.
There are new questions today about whether President Biden should debate his 2024 Democratic primary challengers, even though they barely register in any polls.
Barely register in the polls. Now, that is either complete ignorance or an outright lie. Marianne and RFK Jr. are both polling higher than the vast majority of the GOP contenders. So then Chris has the Axios reporter on to set up the focus group and brings in the Biden 2020 advisor to respond. Let's listen to how the Biden aide tries to spin all of this.
I honestly do not think Team Biden should reconsider on the debate piece, because to the point that you made earlier, we have not seen an incumbent president running for re-election having a debate with his major party opponents since the 1970s.
We've also, Lindsay, to be fair, never had a president of this age, and we've never had a president with these kinds of questions about his age and mental acuity.
Sure, and I think that's a fair question, and Biden has said it's a fair question, but the reality is debating people on the same side is actually not going to strengthen the candidate. It tends to weaken the candidate. When the president, let's be very honest, and we've talked about this on this show and over the past few years, he's actually done a lot for this country in the first 2 years and his first 100 days, right? Obviously, there are going to be a lot of holdups in Congress, given the Republican majority right now, but he did have a very historic first 2 years. And so the president is going to prove some of these doubters wrong, get them to, restore their confidence in him as they did in 2020, as he continues to communicate these policies and campaign across the country.
So, first of all, the fact that the process has been undemocratic in the past is no excuse for keeping an undemocratic process, especially in an age where this party, the Democratic Party, is all on their moral high horse about defending democracy. What a bunch of BS. Second of all, it's just ahistorical nonsense that primaries weaken a candidate. On the contrary, Trump and the Republicans had quite a raucous primary back in 2016, you may recall, and he won in the general election. Obama and Hillary had a raucous and at times very personal primary in 2008. There is zero doubt in my mind that process sharpened Obama and convinced Americans that he was, in fact, ready for prime time and to become president of the United States. But even if you believe primaries do weaken a candidate, you should still support them. If you're trying to combat attacks on democracy by undermining democracy, that path still leads to authoritarianism, and it should be rejected. And finally, if you're so confident in Biden's accomplishments and his strength as a candidate, you should welcome the chance for him to prove to the American people just how ready for the job he is. Convince us. It's actually profoundly sad and distressing for the nation, the position we find ourselves in right now. Two old men that majorities don't want, refusing to subject themselves to the basics of the democratic process. All I can say is please keep the pressure up, because while the DNC may not yield and actually host debates, it will at least illuminate to some who've been drinking the Kool-Aid just how full of it and fragile the Democratic Party actually is. And lifting the partisan blinders from the eyes of more Americans, that is always a worthy project. Sagar, I thought it was pretty surprising. Julian Castro. Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.